Hi, I'm Mark Huberman. I'm president of the National Health Association. And the National Health Association is the oldest organization on the planet advocating the benefits of a 100% whole plant food diet and lifestyle, something we've been doing since our founding in 1948. I'm privileged to be the national president, and I am most proud of being the publisher of Health Science Magazine. What you see before you here, it's a unique publication in that it's 40 pages long, has no advertising in it, just articles on the gold standard of what we call plant-based living and diet. We're 100% SOS-free diet, articles on health, interviews with the leading stars and voices of our health movement like Joel Fuhrman, Alan Goldhammer, Michael Clapper, Michael Greger, and those like. Every magazine has those feature interviews. It has recipes in it, it has testimonials. It's a real magazine that comes out quarterly, comes to your mailbox. But for people that want to be green, they can get it that way too. Really a very unique publication in the space of our health movement, and I'm very proud that our association publishes it. And I'm proud to be the editor-in-chief of that publication. Well, I've had a very privileged upbringing, not privileged in terms of wealth, but privileged in terms of health. My parents were pioneers in the whole food, plant-based health movement. They came upon this way of living even before I was born, but when I was born in 1951 is where they really started to ripen into it, and were way ahead of their time in believing the importance of organic fruits and vegetables, whole foods, avoiding processed foods, having fresh air, exercise, all those key elements of health. And my parents, again, way ahead of their time, became members of the American Natural Hygiene Society, which is an organization that now called the National Health Association that I'm the national president of. And again, that organization was advocating that kind of diet and lifestyle way back in 1948. My parents were early members of that. It took me to their conferences. And when I was born in 1951, they thought this was the ideal diet in which to raise a child. And believe it or not, for all of my 70 years, I've never had a piece of pizza, never had a piece of fish, never had a piece of meat, and for 32 and a half years was just raw fruits and vegetables, kind of the ideal natural hygiene diet that we had. And that's given me, I think, an extraordinary birthright, an extraordinary health and vitality. And again, I'm 70 years old. I don't think I look 70 years old. I don't think I act 70 years old. I certainly don't feel 70 years old. And I owe it all to the blessings of health that my parents gave me very, very early on. I consider myself a very lucky guy. I haven't met too many people like me that have had that extraordinary benefit of being vegan from day one. It's something of which I'm pretty proud, but I guess I would say a lot of people say that, geez, wow, veganism must be the center of his life, but it's not. I like to sometimes describe myself as a man or a person for all seasons, because while I love my salads every day, and I love my avocados, and especially my fresh peas, I love theater. I love sports. I love politics. I'm involved with humanity. I love civil rights. I love being involved in the community, in my synagogue. So food is kind of, Joel Fuhrman says that we should eat to live, not live to eat. That's the Mark Huberman story. I have eaten to live and to live life to its fullest. And I think I've had a great opportunity to do that. I've traveled the world, been involved in a lot of community organizations, a lot of great causes, and I think that the health and vitality and all that I have from my birthright has allowed me to do that to the fullest, and I plan on doing that for a good many years. I'm just getting started in some ways of living the good life. You know, most people think that the whole food, plant-based health movement really had its beginnings in like 1987 when John Robbins wrote his groundbreaking book, Diet for a New America. And T. Colin Campbell, a couple of years later, came out with the China Study. And then Forks Over Knives came out, I think, in 2011, that groundbreaking documentary that featured Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. Campbell. It was just a great thing. But really, from my standpoint, the credit for the foundation of that came from the members of the American Natural Hygiene Society, the founders of our health organization, Dr. Herbert Shelton, Dr. William Esser, Dr. Gerald Benish, who were people, when founded our organization in 1948, were advocating this kind of diet and lifestyle. And one of our founders, a guy by the name of Dr. Herbert Shelton, wrote this remarkable book called Human Life, Its Philosophy and Laws. It looks like almost like something you'd find from Harry Potter or something, a historical treasured book. but he wrote it in 1928. He wrote this book, Human Life, Its Philosophy and Laws, that just took, and that was Dr. Shelton. So a prolific writer. He wrote the hygienic system, wrote over 50 books on diet and lifestyle. And his books are the ones that inspired Joel Fuhrman and Alan Goldhammer and Frank Sabatino and that. But he was writing in 1926 about a revolutionary approach to healthcare, that the focus needed to be on prevention, identifying the causes of disease and removing them, not treating symptoms, and recognizing the fact that the keys to health and well-being are found in a plant-based, what they called a vegetarian vegan lifestyle. They didn't use the word vegetarian, they didn't use the word vegan, they used whole foods was what they did. And whole foods meant you didn't have oil, you didn't have salt, you didn't have sugar, anything that weren't whole foods. They were advocating that, and he wrote a whole hygienic system back in, again, in the 1930s, and then kept writing into the 40s and the 50s, and wrote a book. He wrote one of the unique things that Dr. Shelton did. He wrote a book called Fasting Can Save Your Life, that to this day is the greatest selling book ever written on the subject of water fasting, and recognizing the fact that in a medically supervised fasting state, your body has extraordinary powers to heal itself, to recover itself. And when you give it a physiological rest, it's amazing the conditions that can just kind of restore itself. Dr. Shelton wrote this book, I believe, in 1964. And it still is probably the most popular book ever written on the subject of fasting. So these guys, Dr. Shelton, Dr. Benish, and even those guys base their writings on 19th and 18th century reformers like Russell Thacker Trall and John Tilden wrote about impaired health, the cause on impaired health, all saying the same thing. We need to focus on the causes of disease. It's not just some magic microbes going around or some curse that you'll get struck with, or lightning, not the misfortune of life. You really can control your own health destiny. And this was the greatest health discovery that these people identified, that it was found in what they called fruits and vegetables, what we now call a plant-based diet. We all called that living without preservatives and additives, and eating whole foods, getting rest, getting exercise, getting fresh air, pure water, organic farming. These people, Dr. Shelton, Dr. Esser, they were champions of organic farming long before we had national standards about those things. These people were true pioneers of this health movement, way ahead of their time. And I'm so proud that in the National Health Association, formerly called the American Natural Hygiene Society, that's our heritage. That's our legacy, that we've been championing these principles for over 70 years in our organization, and over 170 years if you go back even prior to that. So it's quite a legacy we've got. It's something of which I'm very proud. A lot of people think that because I've been in our health movement so long that maybe I'm a doctor, because I'm really close friends with Dr. Goldhammer and Dr. Fuhrman and Dr. Greger and all these people, but I'm not. I'm actually a lawyer by trade. Became a lawyer back in 1976, so I've been a lawyer for over 40 years. I spent a good part of my time in about 10 years in the private practice, another 10 years working as a magistrate for our juvenile court, working with neglected, dependent, abused children, delinquent children. And then the last 20 years of my life, I was the chief magistrate of and a judge of our domestic relations court, the divorce court in Mahoning County. And so I'm licensed with the Supreme Court of Ohio. I went to Ohio Northern University, the University of Pittsburgh, licensed in the Supreme Court of Ohio. I've had a very, very rich legal career, and a good part of that I spent during my years with the National Health Association counseling people on how to protect their health freedom. And that's something that has always been very important to me, and probably never more important in the age of COVID right now with vaccine and vaccine mandates. But I've spent a good part of my life advocating for health freedom as just part of my legal career. But again, I spent most of my time in family law, and I retired in 2017, but I still work as a mediator and trying to help people resolve their disputes by themselves. I do mediations for our local probate court and find that really rewarding, helping people reach their own, reaching their own solutions rather than having a decision imposed upon them by the court. They tend to be a lot more lasting when people can reach agreement together, whether it's in divorce or in probate or whatever kind of agreement. So I still do mediations, and I enjoy that a lot. I've been a public citizen most of my life. In addition to working in the court system, I've been involved in a lot of community organizations, one of which I am most proud is that I was on our we have a suburban school district, the Boardman Schools, and I got their Distinguished Alumni Award in 2012. I served on their school board for over 20 years, helped build a $3.6 million performing arts center. But in addition to that, I was a founding member of an organization called the Ohio Association of Magistrates that does legal education for court magistrates. I'm very involved in our community and our civic association. I received their Lifetime Achievement Award in 2019. A founding member of Northeast Ohio Legal Services, our community legal aid, which people call it now, the Legal Services Corporation. I've done that. I'm on a corrections planning board here locally. I'm involved with our local synagogue. My late great father, Max, had a favorite quotation that was from the educator Horace Mann, who's considered the father of public education, who has a statue on Boston Commons. And he had a quotation that my father always cited and kind of embedded upon me: be ashamed to die until you've won some victories for humanity. Be ashamed to die. I don't intend to be ashamed when I die by being involved in the community and helping make the world a better place for my having been here, whether it's people that can't afford legal representation or throwaway kids that don't have anybody to advocate for them. As one of the founding members of our domestic violence women's shelter in our area. Those are all things you do to try to make the world a better place. That's what my father taught me to do, and that's a motivation that I have both for the NHA and for community organizations. I have a problem of saying no when people ask me to do things. If it's a good cause, they also say, you need something done, you go to a busy person. I've always been one of those people, but I've always had a very strong social conscience, and I wish more people had that in this world. It would be a better place. So I do look back in some amazement at the life that I've had. If you think back in 1951, when I was born and when I was going to grade school in the 50s and 60s, life was a whole lot different than it is today. There were no salad bars. If you went at a restaurant, if you went into a grocery store, there was maybe a cooler, and it was usually in the back of the store where they would have head lettuce or a few carrots or some tomatoes. There were still some farmers markets, but they were few and far in between. But that's the way I grew up. I grew up on fresh fruits and vegetables. My parents raised me on raw fresh fruits and vegetables, and that's the way I lived for the first 32 and a half years of my life. So I went to grade school, and where everybody else had their little jar of milk and their sandwiches, and they'd go through the line, I would bring my brown bag lunch with an apple, a banana, some cashews, sometimes a peach with the pit taken out, some cashew butter in the middle. And that's what I enjoyed. And I look forward to a salad every day. And that's what I did. And people often ask, how was I able to withstand the temptation of all of the other things around me, pizza and ice cream day and cookie day on Valentine's Day and all the cookies and things like that. It is, I find just amazing, I guess, when I look back, that what you've never had, taste is kind of a learned behavior. What you've never been exposed to, you don't have an interest in. And so for me, it was really never willpower. These were just things that I wasn't interested in. I knew what I liked, and I look forward to them every day. And I think that maybe the key was not that I'm just some extraordinary character with a strong will and personality, but I had a wonderful family. People remember the TV show Father Knows Best, where there was this perfect family where parents were home and they all loved each other, and they would do things together. They'd hike together. They'd go to the parks together. I had a very, very loving family that just loved my brother. I have an older brother, Jeff. They loved us without qualification, and we were just one big happy family growing up. And if my parents raised me and said that a raw food diet and lifestyle was the best diet for my health, well, they loved me, and I believed that. And veganism and vegetarianism and a raw food diet was not the center of my universe. My center of my universe was sports and travel and the parks and theater and movies, and that's what was the center of my life. The other maybe missing, other unique thing that I had going for me is that my parents started a mom and pop health food store in 1958. And they were way ahead of their time in terms of a health food store, because they were the first health food store in the country to sell and retail organic fruits and vegetables. And this was long before there were standards for those things. But my mother, in particular, would identify these legacy organic growers, the real pioneers of the organic farming movement, and they would find the best tree-ripened pineapples, the best mangoes, the best cashew nuts, the best everything. So I always had, not just that I was on a raw food diet, but I had the best raw foods. I had the best peas, the best mangoes, the best pineapples. And because I was a pretty sociable and affable kid, my neighbor friends would always be at my house, and I'd always be at their house, and they loved my dried apricots and my cashew nuts. So I was not, in some sense, what you'd consider an oddball. I was just different. And my parents raised me to not be ashamed to be different, but to be proud of who you are. And so I never, there were times when I suppose growing up when people would make fun of my eating rabbit food in school, but hey, I just let that sort of bounce off, and I've let it bounce off my whole life. And as I got older, as I got into high school and all that, I then began to, it wasn't just a matter of the way I was brought up, but it was a matter of personal choice. I began to read more and learn more that there really was a scientific validity to the health program that I was raised on. Not just that it was something that I did, but it was something that I chose to do and always tried to get better. And maybe the most rewarding thing about my life and my involvement in the National Health Association has been that this diet and lifestyle that I was raised almost as a religion when I was growing up, as a belief, as a philosophy, has been scientifically validated by people, contemporaries of mine, like Joel Fuhrman and Alan Goldhammer and Frank Sabatino and Michael Greger and Michael Clapper. It is a really, really rewarding thing to see the lifestyle that I was brought up in without choice when I grew up, obviously, in my early years. But to see that validated, what a gift of health that I've been given in my life. And it's now in my adult life, in my retired life, to be able to champion that and advocate that and spread the message of that and the promise of that and the empowerment that this diet and lifestyle gives everyone is a really rewarding place to be at this time in my life. My parents, Max and Ruth Huberman, were real pioneers. My father was a real fan of Rachel Carson, who wrote the book Silent Spring, recognized the dangers to our environment of pesticides and that, and was a champion of raising and eating organic food. We had a huge garden in our backyard. In fact, we didn't have a backyard. We had a path, and our backyard was a garden. And my father was a great gardener, and so we grew our own romaine lettuce and tomatoes and Jerusalem artichokes and fruit trees and all that stuff. But when they had a store, they would retail organic fruits and vegetables. And again, it was very unique. No one was doing that. This was long before Whole Foods and Wild Oats and all these stores. This is 1958, 1960. They were doing that. So this is my parents, Max and Ruth Huberman. They were very vibrant champions of this diet and lifestyle. They were very proud of what they did, and I had a little longer hair back then from the 1960s and that, but I worked in the store and learned about retail produce. And again, we're at the ground floor of the organic food movement. My father was one of the champions of establishing organic standards so that we could rely upon, when you saw that USDA label, you knew what you were getting. But even before we had that, he was involved with an organization called the National Food Associates. That was an organization of organic farmers that came together to find a better way of living and growing. And now we see it's part of the regenerative health movement that people talk so much about. But these were really pioneers of that, so I was really proud of them. And my parents also you'll see the name of the store was Natural Health Foods and Barbell Center. My parents also recognized the fact that health was more than just diet. It was more than just what you eat. Exercise was important, and so they were early pioneers of free weights and weight benches and things like that. And they used to have a slogan that said, "Natural Health Foods and Barbell Center, where good nutrition and physical fitness go hand in hand." And that's what they did. And they operated that store for 33 years. And whenever anyone would come in, they would sell vitamin pills, but the vitamin pills and supplements, vitamin C, vitamin D, the ones that they sold were without additives, without preservatives. They were the purest ones they could find. But if anybody asked them, Max or Ruth, which vitamins do you take? They would honestly tell them, we don't take any, we eat the food. Why would I take vitamin C tablets or capsules when I can drink a glass of orange juice or eat navel oranges every day? And the same thing with all the other foods. But for those that were not, they had the purest supplements on the planet, the kind that Joel Fuhrman sells today, and that at the True North Health Center, if you get their supplements or their vitamin B12 or D3, they are the same kind of suppliers of purity products that my parents did way back when. So that's another legacy of which I'm very proud. In the conferences of the American Natural Hygiene Society, formerly the National Health Association, we've been holding annual conferences for over 70 years. And here's a picture of a banquet where you talk about whole foods. This was the banquet. Whole foods meant you get apples, you get oranges, you get pineapples, you get avocados, and you take them to your plate and you cut them yourself, and leaves of lettuce. That's what these were. This is in this picture that you're probably looking at, probably came from Detroit in 1959. This was a banquet of our organization in 1959. Here was our conference. This was in 1961, one of the first. I was 10 years old, and I was, again, kind of a unique individual being raised on raw fruits and vegetables, so they asked me to speak about growing up for my first 10 years at the Pink Congress Hotel in Chicago. So I was before a microphone many moons ago, and maybe it was a precursor of my life in the theater. And being a lawyer way back when. So I've always been pretty comfortable on my feet, but I have a long history of being involved and a leader of our health movement. I graduated from law school in 1976. I entered undergraduate school at the University of Pittsburgh when I was 18 years old. And one of the founders of our organization, Jack Duntrop, thought I was an up-and-coming guy and got me on the board of directors of the American Natural Hygiene Society when I was 18 years old, and I've never left. That was 1969, so you do the math. That was a few good years ago, but I've been a very proud leader of this movement ever since. Became the youngest president in 1977, and that's when actually Health Science Magazine was created. I thought as a young president that the organization needed something to give to its members as a value of membership. So Health Science, we came up with lots of different terms, and health science kind of best expressed what our interest was. We made a science out of health. It wasn't a philosophy. It was all about health, and it was all health based on science. So we liked the term. That's our URL, healthscience.org, and that's kind of how we're known. That's the name of our magazine. And that magazine has been published since 1978, so 43 years we've been publishing the magazine. And for all those 43 years, there's no advertising in it, just articles on the gold standard of this way of living. And now, since 2014, I've become the editor-in-chief of that publication, and all 29 or 30 of those issues on the wall, those are all ones that I am proud to say that I have been the editor-in-chief of, and continue to work with a really wonderful team. Kathy Fisher of Straight Up Food was our first copy editor. Now it's Janice Ziegler, who does a wonderful job. And now we have two incredible graphic designers, Mairead Reddy and Kirsten Canote of Ready or Not Printing. They do a great job. They have redesigned the new look of Health Science Magazine that came out in summer 2021. That just came out. It's got a bold new look. It's had a very nice reception. The thing of which I think I am so most proud of the magazine is that people tell us repeatedly it is the only magazine they get that they read cover to cover. And I'm proud that we speak to people that way, that we have a nice blend of interviews and profiles of people. We have recipes, but it's not a recipe magazine. We've got feature recipes from Chef AJ and Kathy Fisher and the like, but it's not a recipe magazine. It's got testimonials, it's got member spotlights, and it's got also timeless teaching. Sometimes we'll go back in the magazine and we'll go back to one of our predecessor publications called Natural Hygiene that was published in the late 1950s, early 1960s. And we'll find articles that were written in there that are as timeless today, 60 years ago, they're as timeless today as they were then. Articles by Dr. Shelton, Dr. Benish. Again, this was what I like to call our organization the greatest health discovery, that we came up with a different way of looking at health and disease, that health is built, not bought, that we need to live in harmony with nature. Healthcare is self-care. These are all principles that our organization was founded upon and that we continue to champion today. People ask whether you can be healthy as a child and happy as a child growing up on fruits and vegetables, no meat, no ice cream, no dairy, no pizza. Well, here I am to tell you in October 1952, I was about a year and a half old, and I was an optimist from day one, and you can see this is not just a select photo. I was a happy kid, and I've been a happy guy most of my life. I was a piano player with my older brother Jeff. I loved to do that. And my cakes were a cantaloupe with candles in it. That's what we did. We had a cantaloupe, and it had cashew butter and strawberries and raspberries, and I enjoyed them. I enjoyed them very much. And there's a little more closer up of again, this was our joy. And there was my brother and I. They say that you can't carry any weight. You got to be a skinny guy if you're not drinking milk and all that, right? But this guy over here, wouldn't say I was tipping the scales, but I certainly wasn't undernourished. They weren't going to call the health department on my parents for looking like that. But again, I think if there's a common thread that goes through the pictures, we were a happy family, a beautiful family, a gardening family. We had a big garden in our backyard, and my father taught us using a hoe and a rake and transplanting romaine lettuce from day one. So again, I've been an upbeat guy most of my life, and that started way back in 1952. I've had a good life, and I think my diet and lifestyle has given that to me, along with some remarkable parents that were there every step of the way, encouraging me to be the most that I could be. And I've just been a very lucky guy. I've been a lawyer for my entire professional life. And in that case, I've spent not just doing the typical things that lawyers do of representing defendants charged in criminal cases and personal injury cases and probate cases and domestic relations cases, but because of my interest in health, I've also been one who have represented people and represented doctors who are following alternative lifestyle approaches to healthcare. And I've also seen occasionally parents who have been charged and arrested by our local children's services agencies of raising their children on vegan diets and alleging that their children fail to thrive and sometimes get seriously ill. And those are complicated cases. And while I've always been a champion of health freedom, one of the things that I have seen over the years, and I think Dr. Huberman and others would tell you the same, is that it's unfortunate that even within the vegan movement, that people think that raising a child vegan simply without meat and dairy, that means that that's healthy. And that's not the case. Vegan, just being unmeat, doesn't make you healthy. Potato chips are vegan. Marijuana is vegan. Any number of things that can be without meat doesn't mean healthy. In fact, we've always been champions in our health movement of again, whole foods and without added salt, oil, and sugar, being SOS free. That's really important because again, and I pick up so many vegan and vegetarian publications, and I look at the recipes and they're laden with oil, they're laden with salt, they're laden with sugar, they're laden with maple syrup, all kinds of things that doesn't make them healthy. And so you see the extremes. You can see people that can fail to thrive on vegan diets that can be emaciated, and then you can see people that are obese on vegan diets. How could that be? It can be because vegan doesn't translate to healthy. What we believe in the National Health Association is that a whole plant food diet without added oil, salt, and sugar helps you avoid the pleasure trap foods. That's the real key to health. But parents that don't do that look at veganism as an end in and of itself, can find themselves in trouble. As a general rule, being vegan from a diet standpoint is certainly better for the planet. It's certainly better for the critters and all the works. But for long-term health, it needs to be more than just no meat, no dairy, no cheese, no eggs, things like that. So I think that people make the mistake of thinking that by being vegan, they're being healthy. They're not necessarily being. They can be. I'm a vegan. I'm a very proud vegan. I've been a vegan from day one. But I'm a healthy vegan. I like to think I am. And I also share the vegan values of being ethical and being respectful of our planet and worried about our soil and our environment and all that. That's all part of veganism to me. But again, from a health standpoint, I've unfortunately seen cases over the years, more than I'd like to acknowledge, of people who have raised their children vegan and gotten into trouble trying to raise their children vegan because they're not doing it healthy. They're not doing it well. I was raw foods from day one and lived that way for 32 and a half years. And I would say that I was a pioneer in the trail mix world. Trail mix is all the rage today, but to me, that probably if there was Wikipedia would talk about where trail mix came from, it came from Mark Huberman with his bag of cashews and raisins and hazelnuts in his pocket. And they weren't sulfured raisins, they weren't salted peanuts or salted cashews or roasted cashews. These were raw cashews and raisins and dates and date chips and things like that. That's what I grew up on, and I found that very nourishing, and fortunately, my friends found them pretty good too, because we had the best cashews and the best raisins and the best dried apricots and that kind of stuff. So my friends even liked that as well. But I mean, that's, again, I grew up, as I indicated earlier, taste is learned behavior. I loved what I knew, and this is the way I lived. And since I lived well, and as I grew older, I thought, well, there's a great benefit in, the more whole foods you have in your life, the better you are. But as I got a little older, I guess I started to wonder, was I living on a raw food diet because I had to, because if I deviated from it, I'd become deathly sick, or was I doing it because it was the only thing that I knew? And it was interesting to me as I was, again, becoming a leader in this health movement and a contemporary of Joel Fuhrman and Alan Goldhammer and their peers, that no one, very few, were championing a raw food diet. In fact, most of them thought, well, it's certainly great to have as many raw, live foods that you could get, and that's an ideal way to live. It's difficult for some people to sustain their weight, difficult to thrive, difficult to even be satisfied in what you eat of just having raw fruits and vegetables. And some, as we know, to get legumes, beans, and things like that, you don't really eat them raw. You have to cook garbanzo beans, and kale is not the most delightful thing to eat raw. Lightly steaming things, but it wasn't something that I did. So at 32 and a half years old, I was vacationing in Italy, and I did what I did every day. Whenever we would go out on an excursion, I'd take a little bag of apples and cashews and a banana and an orange and things like that. And I would just have my little brown bag, and everybody else would stop at the snack shops or whatever the fast food places. But I did what I did. I was happy with it. And this one particular day, we had a long trip. We started about 6:30 in the morning from Rome, went to Naples, Sorrento, the Isle of Capri, Pompeii, and came back. And during the day, I kind of ran out of food out of my little brown bag, and there was no stands where I could get anything extra. And we wound back at an Italian restaurant about 7 o'clock at night, and I was hungry. But being a raw foodist at this Italian restaurant, there was nothing for me to eat. If I ate a baked potato, I could have had a baked potato. If I ate cooked green beans, I could have had cooked green beans. And even their salad was kind of laced with vinegar and oil and things like that that Italians are apt to do. And that wasn't appealing to me. So I went to bed hungry that night. And I thought, when I came home, I said to myself, when I come home, I'm going to try some cooked foods. I'm going to try some of my mother's great wild rice, some of my mother's sweet potatoes, and things like that, and see what would happen. I tried it. I liked it. It was satisfying. And after 32 and a half years, I lost my raw food virginity and became a man and enjoyed cooked meals ever since. And I'm still pretty clean. I still really never changed. I'm still salt, oil, and sugar free. I don't like really very complicated meals. I'm still pretty simple. I like my wild rice and my steamed vegetables and eggplant patties and split pea soup. But probably the biggest change that happened when I was 32 and a half years old is that I gained and I acquired a taste for cooked vegetables, steamed vegetables, soups, stews, things like that. And now if I have a dinner meal and I don't have some brown or wild rice or white Japanese yams or something like that, I'm hungry, and I do want that. So 32 and a half years was enough. It provided me, I think, a remarkable health foundation that I continue to build upon. I'm a very lucky guy in terms of the health foundation that my parents gave and that I chose to continue and choose to continue to this day, making choices every day in what kind of food I eat, how much sleep I get, how much exercise I get, how much time I get outside. Those are all elements of health that I've learned, and I make those choices every day. And I think that's why at 70 years old, I don't feel much different than I did when I was 50, or maybe even 40. I even had one of those body tests that at Dr. Ron Weiss's place, they did this thing where they measure various ways of measuring your your internal and external health. And my internal health said I believe I was 35 years old. My internal health. Whether that's true or not, I hope so, but I certainly don't feel like I'm 70 years old. I've gone to a number of my high school reunions. We have a very active class. We just had our 50th reunion, and a lot of the people at my reunions, they look like my parents and grandparents, and they have a lot of health problems, and they suffer diabetes, and a lot of them, sadly, are not even with us anymore. That's not going to be my path if I have anything to say about it, and I think I do. I think the greatest blessing of this diet and lifestyle is that you do, to a great degree, control your health destiny. That's what I think I do every day, and that's the great promise of this diet and lifestyle. When I grew up, not eating dairy, not eating cheese and meat and things like that, I needed healthy fats, and my healthy fats came from avocados and cashews and peanuts and things like that. So I ate a lot of that. My avocado, and to this day, avocado is my butter. So when I have baked potatoes and steamed vegetables, avocados are always part of it. And even before I was eating cooked vegetables, avocados were a central part of my salads that I ate every day. And again, I found that it sustained me very much. And for my breakfast and lunch, I remember when I was a kid, one of the founders of our organization, Dr. Benish, said, before people had smoothies were all the rage these days, one of the things that I had is that he would have orange juice, and my mother would grind up sunflower seeds and almonds, ground up almonds and that. And when I would have that in the morning, it would sustain you just like smoothies do. But it was having those healthy fats were an integral part of my diet. And to this day, we were having breakfast together. And on my overnight oatmeal that I made, I ground up flax seeds and chia seeds and cashews and pistachios and all that. And I find that, again, I don't know all the science of it, but I found from a satiation standpoint, it was satisfying. Nut butters, cashew butter, peanut butter, those are all things that I grew up at. Raw, in those days, when I was young, raw cashew butter and raw peanut butter. Now I kind of don't mind it being a little toasted and has a little better flavor, but I still like raw cashew butter that I make in the Champion juicer, and it's a very, very satisfying food. So that's where my healthy fats came from, and to this day still do. I still eat whenever I used to have a reputation when I was on our school board. We'd go to our school board dinners, and everybody'd have their meal, and I'd always have a steamed vegetable plate and a baked potato. I always brought my own avocado. My trademark was I'd bring out my avocado and I'd cut it right there, and that's what would satisfy me. So I still enjoy my nuts and avocados and things like that. One of the truisms of the environmental movement is that if we switch to a plant-based foundation for diet and lifestyle, and we didn't devote so many acres to cattle grazing and these things, the planet would be a much healthier place. We could grow all the avocados we needed in the world if we weren't cutting down rainforests for feedlots, for cattle and things like that. We could. And again, in terms of the economics of a big ag, even in the organic movement, it's a concern. That's why I think we talked earlier, I'm a fan of the Real Organic Project that's trying to strengthen the role of small farmers in this world and recognizing the importance of rebuilding the soil rather than raising things hydroponically and that. I am convinced that whether it's avocados or almonds or cashews or things like that, if we switch to a plant-based economy, we would be able to raise all the avocados we needed, and we would do them in a more egalitarian way. Dr. Joel Fuhrman, one of his favorite phrases that I've always been a fan of is that he says that salads should be your main course. That's been my main course from day one. So most people, a salad is like this. My salads were always like this, and it is to this day. If you come and have dinner with the Hubermans, there is a large salad. That is the first thing that we eat every night. My cooked foods always come later. Joel always says you fill yourself up on a salad, and my salads have always been not just quinoa salads and lentil salads and things like that, but what I call real salads of lettuce and cucumbers and tomatoes and kale and spinach and the whole rainbow of fresh fruits and vegetables. That's the shredded carrots and celery and of course avocados and things like that. And when they're in season, fresh peas. If I have one food synonymous with Mark Huberman, who when I grew up, my grandfather called me the peas man because English peas, shell peas, were always my favorite food in the world. And they say that the health benefits of them are tremendous, but I just like them when they're young and they're fresh and you pick them right out of the garden and they're sugar before they get older and starchy. It's my favorite food in the world. But the salads are, greens have always been the dominant part of my life. My salads are green salads. They're not just bean salads. They're greens. They're romaine lettuce. They're leaf lettuce. They're bok choy. They're celery. They're all those sort of things. And of course the rainbow of colors of peppers and cucumbers and tomatoes and all of that. But salads are the main course. It's always been that way for me, and it always will be. It's still the thing that I look forward to the most. In fact, that there's a frustration that I have in the vegan chic world in which we live, where there are vegan restaurants everywhere. You can't find a salad. They make all these gourmet things, these gourmet patties and things like that you make, and gourmet desserts and all that, few of which are particularly healthy. But you can't get a salad. When I go to a vegan restaurant, bring me a salad. Bring me a real salad with a side of avocado. It's sometimes hard to find. So that's why my wife Wanda kids me all the time that when Joel Furman and I are together in New York seeing a Broadway show, they'll say, "Where do you want to go for dinner?" "We want to go to Whole Foods salad bar so we can make our own salad." That's what we do. So if you see Joel and I, we're like two kids in a candy store. When we're at Whole Foods, we're just piling up. They don't make money on us. Well, they do charge you by the ounce, I guess. So, but that's salads are the main course. It's always been that way for me, and it always will be that for me. And I think that's one thing that is missing from so much of the vegan world and vegan dining is that salads just aren't there. And that's what should be the heart and the foundation of a whole plant food diet. If you go to the True North Health Center, you look at their salad bar, that's what they have. It's a salad bar. That's what you pick from every day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's Mark Huberman's lifestyle as well. In terms of I grew up with a huge salad every day, that has not changed for Mark Huberman. I still eat as big a salad I did when I was a kid as I do as an adult. I have the biggest salad on the table, and fortunately now, about 10 years ago, my wife had her aha moment after 20 years of marriage, and now she's the same as I am, and it's a wonderful thing to share that the salad is the main course in our lifestyle, and it is still the dominant part of our meal. And yes, we'll have baked potatoes and yams and all these wonderful, healthy, sumptuous, SOS-free dinners that you can make, and no tuna, mock tunas and things like that. Burgers and veggie burgers and that, but the salad is still the main course, and that's what I look forward to, and I think that's what's so healthy about it. In 2011, we wanted a bigger kitchen, especially when my wife joined in this lifestyle and really gained the thrill and satisfaction of plant-based cooking and living. So we had a narrow kitchen, but we had a really creative guy who helped us create a galley kitchen. We couldn't put an island in the middle because we didn't have enough room, so we did the next best thing. And we created this kind of galley look, and my pride and joy of this is our Electrolux Icon refrigerator. And this is a plant-based person's dream. You open it up, it looks like one thing, but this is all freezer, this is all refrigerator, and it's actually not so stocked. We need to go to Whole Foods and Costco one of these days, but there is, when I mentioned earlier about the salad, this is the salad that Mark and Wanda and I have every day. This is the main course that we have, and this lasts about a day between the two of us. And I do mung bean sprouts, and we have cucumbers and peppers and avocados and leeks and carrots and cantaloupe, and I mentioned frozen peas from Trader Joe's. They're frozen peas and frozen corn. That's still my favorite. It's a great salad. My wife made me a green smoothie this morning, and this is the frozen side where we've got they say that you should keep your nuts and chia seeds and all that in the freezer, so we do that. All her frozen berries and all that for smoothies. Again, we need to fill up the place. We need to restock the refrigerator. These are soups we batch cook, so we've got to always have extra vegetable soup, split pea soup, creamy wild rice soup, all kinds of soups. But this is a great refrigerator. It's got that kind of theater lighting. You can see everything. You don't have to search through to find it. To me, this was when we did the kitchen. If we did nothing else, I got this. This was my dream, that we could really stock it to the hilt. This has been since 2011. It's been no maintenance. It's really held up really well. And it's neat. It's a freezer and refrigerator, but this kind of common grate makes it look like it's one tremendous unit. Over here we have there's a pantry guy was really pretty creative in building out the shelf. So we've got yams, the Japanese yams we talked about, which are your favorite or my favorite. We've got red onions and white onions and shallots. We've got down here, we've got all kinds of garbanzo beans and lima beans, and all SOS free. 365 makes all with no salt added. You know, you can go to the store and you can get them, but you got to watch that they're not. We try to get them dried. When you make your garbanzo beans in an Instant Pot, they taste so much better than when you get them out of a box or even an Eden can. Even though they're salt-free, it's just not the same. They taste so much better when you do it that way. And we've got our oats and every kind of... this is a neat product that they now started carrying at Costco. So for those people that are concerned about gluten, here's 100% organic, gluten-free, sprouted, rolled oats. It's a great, great product. Nuts.com, I get when we make cookies and that. They make their golden raisins from nuts.com, organic Hunza raisins. We have a wine cooler, but it has no wine in it. It's a beverage cooler. It's got Dr. Huberman's vinegars, and it's got our rolled oats and things like that, and juices and that. And here's those sapotes we talked about, this unusual tropical fruit that we get from California. Our Instant Pots, we actually have a third Instant Pot in the kitchen. This is Vitamix. Makes a composter that's an amazing thing that you can take your kitchen scraps, okay, and put them in this little composter. It dries it, it grinds it, cools it, and changes the filter. And look what it turns into, a pan of waste like this that you keep on your counter. You can just throw all your scraps in, and this is what it does to it in a couple hours. And you can just put that on your garden. Not only is it better for the planet, but it's also, even smells, if people on the camera could smell, you really smell the aromatic side of this great device that Vitamix has come up with. So this is my Huberman organic garden. It's about 20 by 40, something like that. And as you'll see, they're all raised beds right now, and this is the fall season, so there's only a few cherry tomato plants left, a couple of dill plants out there. There's an errant sunflower in the corner, but it was about a month or two ago, was filled with peas and tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and lettuce and kale and Swiss chard, and it was quite a bounty. So now I use raised beds because they're easy to take care of. It's all completely organic raised bed soil, and by putting fabric underneath, it keeps the weeds down and makes it really easy to take care of. And I got like river rock all around it so weeds don't grow up in between. So it's a fairly low maintenance sort of way to raise things, but there's nothing, people ask me often if I'm a really spiritual guy. And I wouldn't say, I find my most spirituality when I'm in the garden picking a cherry tomato or picking a fresh strawberry or shelling some fresh green peas. That is something very spiritual or magical for me. And here, I don't know if you can catch it over here, but interesting, I have a couple of extra cherry tomatoes that just kind of grown up, and they've grown into this flowering crab tree, and up in the corner they've just grown up. Here's some that are still growing up in the tree like Johnny Appleseed, but there are a couple of ones that are down here, and there is nothing better than picking a cherry tomato right out of the garden. There's nothing like it. That's magical. And again, I'm in my element when I am in my garden. There's a song from the Fantastics, the musical The Fantastics, that I'm always very proud of. A man who plants a garden is a very happy man, and I'm a very happy man when I'm in my garden. So one of the reasons that my parents raised me on a raw food diet is that when I was born, my parents were very, very early in this health movement, didn't know a lot about it, didn't understand. They just kind of as a matter of faith thought it was the right thing to do. My father had health problems, my mother had health problems, my older brother had health problems, and they all found that by adopting a vegetarian diet and getting fresh water and exercise and things like that, they were able to overcome their health problems. So I come along in 1951, and my parents were very zealous about this way of living. That zealousness translated in two areas that were very controversial at that time. One was not vaccinating their children, not wanting to give them vaccinations that everybody did. And then the other one was wanting to breastfeed when more people were bottle feeding. So much pressure was put on my parents. They called we talked earlier about parents that were raising their children, that sometimes the health department would be called on them because their kids were too skinny or weren't thriving, or people thought they were being neglected by not giving them milk. Well, that was the case with my family. My parents thought, my extended family, my parents' parents, on both sides, as well as my mother's sisters and my dad's brothers, all thought that they were neglecting their children, committing abuse even, not raising them this way, put so much pressure on my parents that my mother, who was trying to breastfeed me, her milk spoiled. And I developed a condition. I was born a very happy, healthy, 8-pound something else child. 6 months later, I was 6 pounds and something, like a pack of bones. Developed a condition that they tell me was projectile vomiting. Couldn't keep any food down. And they took me under the care of a Dr. Benish, who was in Cleveland at that time, one of our founders. And he put me on, believe it or not, at that young age, from what my parents tell me, a fast for like 24, 36 hours just to kind of rest, and got me on probably the only non-vegan thing I ever had in my life was a regimen of raw goat's milk for a period of time because my mother couldn't breastfeed. But I quickly got over that, and then fresh fruits and vegetables, and I made it through. And because I made it through, I think that my parents thought, well, my God, he was deathly sick. He got better. This must be the ideal diet. And so they raised me that way on this raw food diet, even though they weren't on raw food diet themselves. My older brother wasn't. They weren't even vegans for a long time. It was a path, a journey for them. But that's the way I was raised. But even me, I mean, I think I evolved. There was one of our doctors once said that we can always try to do better. So early on, vegetable oil was not so verboten a thing, and that's as a salad dressing I used. But then I came to learn that vegetable oil was not healthy for anybody, and I cut that out. I learned that having too much nut butters and things like that, you could have too much of that, was not a good thing. As I've gotten older in life, I've learned the importance of exercise. So now I go to a personal trainer 3 days a week. We can always try to do better. And I think as we get older, it's always important to do better, because I think, again, every day you make choices to affect your health destiny. So I try to do better every day. I try to get a little more sleep every day. I try to get a little more rest every day. Oh, that's probably the weakest link in my chain, that I don't do that as well as I should, but I'm at least aware of it, trying to do better, trying to find a little better balance. But my diet has always been my foundation, and I have been very diligent about that. And I've always tried to do better, and why I still choose to have organic foods and choose to, I kind of respect the intermittent fasting and trying not to eat past 6 o'clock at night. I do try to do that. I try not to go to sleep on a full stomach. I think those are all things that science is telling us is a healthy thing to do. Those are all changes that I choose to make late in life. And I don't consider it deprivation. I consider it conscious choices for longevity. And I do it every day. So these are the Huberman girls. This is my daughter Lisa, my first marriage. She lives in New York City and teaches, works at Trader Joe's. My daughter Heather, she is a case manager for our juvenile court. This is my niece Liz, who just got married. Well, they're both married, but Liz is a case manager at Children's Services in Summit County in Akron, Ohio. That's yours truly, and that's my lovely wife Wanda. That's the Huberman girls. I never knew the secret of having a boy. I just got girls galore. But I know which way the toilet seat's supposed to go, and I know everything about feminine hygiene products. I'm a veteran of all those worlds. My wife Wanda and I, we have a unique family. I was married before and had a daughter of my first marriage. Lisa works and lives in New York. And I raised her as a vegan, and she's been vegan from day one. Like me, it's the only thing she knew. She wasn't raised on raw foods. I chose not to raise my child on raw foods because I didn't think it was necessary, and still don't think it's necessary. But I raised her on, she is a vegan, and has been a vegan her whole life, and has enjoyed the good health benefits that goes with that. My wife Wanda had a child of her prior marriage, a couple of years older than my daughter Lisa, and she was not raised as a vegan. When we got together, she certainly made good health choices for a while, but again, didn't have the same foundation, didn't see the world through the same lenses and the pressures of life and society. When she got into high school, did what lots of kids do. They fall into the pleasure trap, and so she has not enjoyed the good health that my daughter Lisa has. And then my wife and I raised a third child, our niece, that we had the privilege of raising. And again, she had been through a lot of things, so we didn't choose to raise her as vegan. She had been gone a lot through her life. So I guess I have an overarching philosophy. And that is, Chef AJ once told me the secret of my success and why I was able to toe the line for so many years is that she said one time I should call my book that I write called Don't Get Started. So I never got started. I never was attracted to these, to my tastes were never oriented toward meat and cheese and dairy and bread and these kinds of things. So it was easy for me to stay within the confines of this diet and healthy diet and lifestyle. But I also believe that it's kind of a personal philosophy of mine that you can't impose this diet and lifestyle either on your children. You can control what's at home, and it's kind of what we did. So when Wanda and I were raising the kids, when they were at home, they had salads, they had things like that. But we weren't the police. We recognized that you could have neurotic children if you tried to condemn them for the choices they made. You hope that you plant seeds. We took them to NHA conferences. We exposed them to documentaries and tried to educate them as best we could. Plant the seeds, and they could make their own decisions. And even when I got married to my wife Wanda in 1991, she didn't know anything about vegetarianism. She didn't know anything about Judaism. She didn't know anything about this. And I didn't think it was my right to impose that upon her. People have the right to make their own choices, just like they do about religion. I'm not a proselytizer. I've never been that way about politics or religion. If somebody asks me, like in this interview today, what I think about health, I'll talk to them all day long. If somebody doesn't, I'll talk to them about the Cleveland Indians or the Cleveland Browns or Democrat or Republican politics or constitutional law or civil rights or the environment. Those are things I'll talk about, but if somebody's interested, I'll talk all day long. I don't think you can impose your health philosophy on somebody else. Fortunately, and my great fortune is that I planted those seeds with my daughter Lisa, and they have stuck. They've taken root, and they're pretty strong. She knows what to do when she gets sick. She leads a pretty good life. And my wife Wanda, she founded at True North Health in 2011. She had her aha moment, and now we share this lifestyle. But I think she would say, if she credits, one of the things that's allowed it to be easy is that I gave her the opportunity to find her way herself. I didn't insist, I didn't condemn her from eating health food, junk food. She was vegan, but ate the Amy's pot pies and the vegan cheese pizzas and things like that. But that's okay. That's her right. Who am I to say what religion she should follow or what diet she should follow? I loved her because of who she was, not because of what she ate. So it's an overarching philosophy that I have about life, and it applies to my diet and health. I've been a public citizen all my life. I've been involved in school boards and Playhouse and legal aid and very much a public citizen. But my diet and lifestyle, people are aware of it, but I don't wear it on my shirt sleeves. They'll see when we go out to dinner, I'll have my baked potato and steamed vegetables, but I don't make a big deal about it. This is what I do, and I respect what I do just like I respect what they do. And I think that's an important lesson that parents need to understand. There are so many people in this health movement that they get better and they become zealots for this way of living. And there's probably nothing that can be more nauseating sometimes, and nothing that can put people off more than being an evangelist for this way of living, rather than being an example for this way of living. And I've always found that I've been a lot more persuasive with people by telling them this is what I do and this is what I think, rather than telling them that this is what they should do. You do it by example. And I think, again, that's something that applies not just to health, but to life in general. So when I grew up, my parents owned a health food store. And of course, owning health food stores, the center to this day of health food stores, there's vitamins for everything. Vitamin D, vitamin P, calcium, bone meal, everything there is. And we sold them all. And in my parents' store, the one thing that they tried to do, kind of what Dr. Huberman tries to do and Dr. Goldhammer, the supplements that they make available to their patients, they're the purest that you could find, with the least additives and preservatives and binders and things like that. They were the healthiest they could find. So if people were to take them, these were at least the healthiest that they could find. And not everybody's willing to adopt a whole food plant-based diet. And for those people that that aren't going to eat, aren't going to drink a glass of orange juice every day, then if their vitamin C level is low, as tested by blood work and all that, then they probably should supplement. But I think that the way I grew up was at a period of time in the natural hygiene movement that you didn't need supplements. If you ate the food, you would get all the vitamins and minerals and nutrients. It's just the miracle of life that in this grand platter, rainbow of fruits and vegetables, you'd get all that you need. That was the premise of it. I think that premise is still largely true. What science has shown, though, today is probably in two areas of which there is almost universal agreement. One is in B12, because people are so far afield from the earth and picking things out of their garden, and everything is so sanitized and everything else, the B12 can be an issue. And there's a general agreement that science has established that vegans probably should test their B12 level and in most cases would benefit from a supplement. So I take a B12 supplement. I'm convinced. As I mentioned earlier, I'm the lawyer, not a doctor. So I don't try to play one even on TV. But I listen to people whom I respect, and the Joel Furmans and Alan Goldhammers and people like that who've researched this stuff, and Michael Greger's, think that you could benefit from a B12 supplement, and if you find yourself deficient, you could suffer some problems. So I do supplement with B12, a sublingual B12. That's, again, the healthiest one I can find. And vitamin D is another one of which there's general agreement, although some say that, if you live in an area and you get adequate amounts of sun and your system can process D3, but you test. And if your vitamin D3 level is low, it's recommended that you supplement. I've tested I test about once a year, once every other year, and if it's low, I supplement D3, and that's what I take. And there's some argument about DHA, that is one that is of some benefit for brain health. The science isn't fully established on it, but I take the purest one I can find, and I do it as kind of hedging my bets. I don't think there's any harm from it, and maybe it'll do some good, but that's about it. There is some argument that that taking a multivitamin can be beneficial. Again, I'm talking about what the most universal agreement is. And the most universal agreement from the people that I respect and read a lot, there's not a lot needed. That horn of plenty that our diet and lifestyle gives us of fresh fruits and vegetables, nuts, dates, seeds, gives you everything we want. I think Dr. Robert Mendelsohn, who wrote this groundbreaking book years ago called Confessions of a Medical Heretic, had a great saying that he used one day. He said, when God made us, he didn't make too many mistakes. He made us to live and to thrive and all that, and he gave us foods that sustain life. And I'm pretty confident, and I'm to some degree living proof. I don't think I'm the perfect specimen by any means, but at 70 years old, I grew up without immunizations. I've taken B12 and D3 and DHA periodically since I've been 60 years old, and still doing pretty good. What I do for me, what seems to work for me, and what seems to be recommended from people for whom I have a lot of respect, the Michael Clappers and Michael Gregers that spend their professional life studying these things. So I don't think there's a lot of need for these kind of supplements, but if you take them, find the purest ones you can find, and have faith and confidence that in the broad diet and lifestyle of nuts, dates, seeds, whole plant foods without added oil, salt, and sugar, you're going to do just fine. Again, I've been pretty blessed with good health most of my life. I had my first cavity when I was about 60 years old, 50 years old, I would say. I broke a tooth, my front tooth. I broke my front tooth when I was little walking my dog. And I had a root canal back when, but I had an implant, a few years ago. But the rest of that, pretty good. I wear glasses, but my vision has not really changed in the last bunch of years. I do have hearing aids. I've had some hearing loss from, way back when, but doesn't seem to be getting any worse, doesn't seem to be getting any better. My wife says it's just selective hearing sometimes. So I got hearing aids so she couldn't make that claim anymore, or at least I couldn't make that claim anymore. I think at 70 years old, I have remarkable strength for a guy my size. I'm, about 120, 125 pounds, something like that. That's been my weight for most of my life, most of my adult life. I'm pretty strong. I have pretty great endurance. Again, I don't think that this diet and lifestyle guarantees you perfect health. It does give you the opportunity to make the best with what you got. And I, don't know if I'll develop a brain tumor tomorrow, but I doubt it. I think that, again, I'm making choices every day. I've been making choices my whole life, conscious choices about what's good for my health. So I'm reasonably optimistic that I'm not going to be one of these guys that's going to be developing dementia well, I'm already at 70, so the early onset of dementia hasn't hit me yet, and I'm not expecting it to. And from what I read from the Schurzeyes and what they write, that the best prevention, the best tools to prevent the onset of that is adopting a whole plant food diet, staying engaged with life. I play chess, I play racquetball, I play ping pong. I try to challenge my mind. I try to read. I try to be engaged in life. So I'm pretty good. My health is pretty good. I have been blessed with, I think, a good health foundation, and I am preserving that foundation. I think one of the most interesting developments in our health movement is the science of epigenetics. That's saying that, you have the notion, as I understand it, again, I'm the lawyer, not the doctor, but my understanding is that, people worry that, oh, Angelina Jolie, breast cancer is in my family. I have the BRCA gene, so I better have preventatively have a double mastectomy to prevent cancer from developing. And the wonderful, or if diabetes is in my family or heart disease is in my family, you're just condemned. That's your lot in life. That's what you're going to have. The wonderful thing and the empowerment of this way of living is that what T. Colin Campbell and Dean Ornish and John McDougall and Caldwell Esselstyn and Joel Fuhrman have all documented and established is that we have these genes, but we can control the expression of those genes. We can turn them on and turn them off through this diet and lifestyle. And that's a wonderful promise that even people that have been living, that haven't been blessed with 70 years of life like I have, that have only been doing this for 10 years or 20 years, there is still this remarkable ability within the body to turn on and turn off the expression of these genes through epigenetics, and that you're not a prisoner of type 2 diabetes, or you're not doomed to have breast cancer because your mother had it. You're not doomed to have a heart attack and need stents and statins because heart problems have been in your family. You really do have the right to control. You have the ability. Your body gives you, and the lifestyle choices you make give the ability, the capacity to control your health destiny. That's what I think I do every day. I think it's important for other people to be vegan for the sake of the planet. I think we're in the era of COVID as we're doing this interview right now. And the one thing that everyone agrees upon, that those that are most at risk from COVID are those suffering comorbidities. They're obese. They have heart disease. They have diabetes. These are the people with weakened and broken down immune systems that succumb and get in a lot of trouble with COVID-19, suffering COVID-19. There's a plant-based physician who's going to be writing an article from our area here. She's a nephrologist, a kidney doctor, deals with these sick people. And she said at a fundraiser we were at for our local food bank the other night that the one truism that she sees is that everybody that she sees in the COVID ward, her patients, they're all obese. All of them. Maybe you'll find an occasional cancer victim or some cancer patient or something like that who's emaciated because of chemotherapy or whatever, but they're obese. And everybody agrees on that. The tragic thing is, in all of the billions of dollars that have been spent educating people about getting vaccines, almost no discussion about preventing these comorbidities that make people vulnerable to these conditions. I know Neil Bernard had a petition when COVID was coming around to get a plant-based physician on the COVID task force. It fell on deaf ears because as Michael Greger said, there's no broccoli lobby. There's vaccine lobbies. They're not broccoli lobbies. And it's sad, but it is important for people to become vegan. I believe that if I contract COVID, I'll be fine. I hope so. I hope I'm right, but I do think that. I've been around people with meningitis. I've been at people around mumps and chickenpox and things like that. Even if I contract them, I get better because that's the way it's supposed to work. Then you develop your natural immunity. But I do worry about all the people with compromised health that I'm around. If I were to be carrying the gene, that's a sad thing. That's why I don't mind wearing a mask around other people that do that, because their immune systems are not like what I think my immune system is. But the world needs to be vegan. The world needs to be whole food, plant-based, need to live on an SOS-free diet. If we did, it would be better for the planet. We all know that the polar ice caps are melting. We all know that the rainforest is being cut down and what effect this is having on global warming. So all animal agriculture has so much to do with this. And it certainly would be better for creatures. We'd be a more humane world if we weren't slaughtering animals for our leather seats in our cars and for the leather jackets and let alone so McDonald's can offer, their dollar McMuffins and things like that. The world's just twisted in its values, but fortunately there's lots of signs of hope. There is a growing consciousness that a plant-based diet is better for our health and for our planet, and I'm also the eternal optimist that with vehicles, that the interviews that people like you are doing in the plant-based world, everybody has their space, and they're making wonderful contributions to it. Forks Over Knives are doing the documentaries that are coming out. Vegan Link, it's pretty great that we're able to. The wonderful thing about the internet is that at this point you can reach millions, hundreds of millions of people that we can never do before. When I grew up in the American Natural Hygiene Society and we had our annual conferences, they were gatherings of the faithful. But it was the 300 people that would gather in Chicago or the 400 people that would gather in New York City, the faithful. But now, when we had our conference with people like you, we could live stream it around the world. So I've always said that for people that want to learn about this diet and lifestyle, the information has never been more available. There's certainly lots of garbage out there on the internet, and be careful what you read and what you take as gospel. But there's a lot of great information, and it's free. So much of it is free. That's a marvelous thing. These are marvelous times, and Vegan Link is making one of those wonderful contributions to that, to the raising of consciousness. So when I was growing up, I'm probably not the best example because I don't know, I've never met anybody that grew up on raw foods like I did. So growing up on raw foods, you really were kind of an oddball, a little bit different. That was a pretty extreme way to grow up. And again, as I think I mentioned earlier, I was always a pretty happy-go-lucky kid, pretty confident in my own skin. I've always been that way, so if people made fun of me and said that I ate rabbit food, that was their problem, not my problem. And I never really let that get to me very much. As I got older, and kids weren't cruel as they were perhaps when I was younger, when I was in high school, and I dated and things like that, even there, it's just kind of an approach that I took about not proselytizing. I never made a big deal. If I ordered a baked potato, or if I ordered a salad, that's just what I did. And I didn't make a big deal about it. I didn't look down on what anybody else did. If they were having pizza and I wasn't, that just wasn't what I did. I didn't judge. And I always had a philosophy. My father, who had philosophies about everything, always said to me, you're picked on, a lot of people are picked on if they allow themselves to be picked on. If people think it gets to you when they make fun of you for doing whatever you're doing, then you can easily fall victim, and then the mocking can even be greater. That never was the case for me. It never stuck. If anybody did kid me about my lifestyle, I knew better. I knew that the problem was theirs, not mine. And again, as I've gone through life, I've just tried not to judge. I mentioned earlier I was a public citizen. I've gone to a lot of dinners, for a lot of events, and I don't make a deal. And if sometimes if I hit the jackpot and they make me a beautiful plant-based meal and a stuffed mushroom or something that's very creative and wonderful, it's great. And if they do an awful job, hey, I eat before I go. So I don't I try not to rely on the benefits of a restaurant or things like that. But again, I think like in anything else, if they make fun of you because of what you eat, or because of your religion, or because of your hairstyle, or because of a ring in your nose, that's more a function of those people. And I was taught by my father to be comfortable in your own skin and to be comfortable with who you are and not let other people define who you are. That's never been the case with me. I know who I am. I know why I do what I do. I'm very comfortable in my own skin about what I think. So I've never been, I've never suffered because of criticism or people mocking me for the diet or lifestyle or religion or politics that I follow. That's their problem. I know who I am, I know why I think, and I know what I do, and I'm convinced, particularly when it comes to diet, that I'm making very intelligent choices that are going to give me the ability to control my health destiny. That's incredibly empowering. And people that, I think if there's one common denominator that people get when they adopt this lifestyle, is they come to that realization that life is not, their health and their vitality is not a matter of chance. It's not a matter of God punishing them for some misdeed. They control their own health destiny by the choices they make every day and what they eat, what's on their plate, and how much sleep they get, how much exercise they get, how they control their emotions, how they treat other people. I've personally not felt like a victim much of my life, even though I've lived a very different life than a lot of other people have. From a diet standpoint. I'm as ordinary as it can be from every other standpoint. As I mentioned, I'm a Browns fan. I'm involved in politics. I love the news. I love reading. I love music. I love theater. That's the stuff of life. And my salad and my avocados and my peas are just my fuel to get there. Will Bulsiewicz calls it fiber fueled. That's my fuel that allows me to live a really great life. Yeah, so in terms of raising your children, the same lifestyle for parents is the same lifestyle for children. That's the wonderful thing about it. Dr. Huberman wrote a book called How to Raise Healthy Children. I think the beauty is everybody went, well, what's the thing for raising children versus raising seniors versus raising adults? It's all the same diet and lifestyle. It's a diet for all seasons, for all reasons. Obviously, there's more psychology involved with raising children. Do you condemn them if they cheat and have a cookie during Valentine's Day at school? As a parent and as a parental guide, I would say no, don't do that. Set the foundation at home. Control what you can control. Set a good example. The fall issue that's coming out has an interview with Dr. Lori Marbus, who talks about raising her children, and that same thing about she controls. You can at least control what's in your house, what's in your pantry. You can do that. But if you try to be the police of your children, you might end up with neurotic children. And there's more to life than fruits and vegetables. You want well-rounded children. You want children to be able to think for themselves. You want children to be self-confident. So you want them to be involved in life more than just policing every meal. But you can set an example at home. I think that's the most important thing you can do. But again, the diet is not so secret. The wonderful thing that's so much easier today of raising children than when I was raised is the recipes are so much better. I never had a cake until my 60th or 65th birthday. I had a Kathy Fisher carrot cake with a pineapple cashew icing on it. First cake I ever had in my life. Now kids can grow up with not dogs, with all kinds of French fries, all healthy stuff, SOS free. It's so much easier now to raise children with healthy foods that they'll like and won't feel like oddballs. My favorite quote is of my father's that I mentioned earlier is, be ashamed to die until you've won some victories for humanity. We all have a lot to do to make the world a better place. We have a lot of challenges in this world, but be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Be involved. Make a difference. That's what I think I get to do. It's a wonderful privilege being president of the NHA and bringing this health message, not just what it's done for me and for my family, but for generations and what it can do for generations to come. So be ashamed to die until you've won some victories for humanity. Be ashamed, the emphasis on ashamed. Be ashamed to die until you've won some victories for humanity. Become involved, make a difference, make the world a better place. That's my motto that my father raised me with, and it's what I continue to abide by. There's never been more information and guides available. If you want to learn, if you want to become scholarly about this, you could take T. Colin Campbell's course to do it. PCRM has a wonderful course to teach people to be trained as health educators in that. You can join the National Health Association and gain the resources of Health Science Magazine and the support that provides. You can come to our conferences where you can immerse yourself with other like-minded people and see how meals are prepared and see and get inspired by some of the best teachers. So there's lots of different paths to this way of living. Dr. Furman has these 21, everybody has kickstarts these days. There's 21-day kickstarts. He's got, there are plans galore, really good ones out there. And that again, we're in the NHA, we're doing our Power Your Health monthly Q&A when people can talk to some of the stars of our movement for free. Ask their questions, get their questions answered, and get inspired. There's cooking shows. One of the things that I'm really proud of in the NHA is two of the latest additions to the NHA family are Dylan Holmes, who runs the Well Your World website that has over 50,000, his YouTube channel has over 50,000 followers. Brittany Giroudi, the same. The Giroudi family website, the Giroudi family channel on YouTube. Tammy and Tom Kramer, Chef AJ. There are so many great resources that you can find to help you get started in this lifestyle. And not just to get started, but to get supported in this lifestyle. There's a book that we sell, a cookbook. There's 1 million cookbooks in the NHA. I'll give a plug for a cookbook. There's 1 million of them out there on vegetarian and vegan cookery. We have one in the NHA called Straight Up Food that's published by Kathy Fisher, who used to be the editor of Health, the copy editor of Health Science magazine. I still consider it to this day the best cookbook, the best whole food, SOS-free cookbook on the planet. It's available on Amazon. It's available from the NHA. You get a member discount when you buy it from the NHA. But there are wonderful tools available to support you in this lifestyle. Again, I think that's what Vegan Link and Chef AJ and the NHA now is doing, is we can bring it to you. You don't have to search for us. We're bringing this message to you every day and providing that kind of support. Those tools have never been available, never been as easily available, as accessible. You know, our parents' generation didn't grow up. Now it's because of the pandemic. Everybody's learned to use Zoom. Everybody's become a little more tech savvy. You never would have imagined it. But now everybody can tune into these summits. And if you can turn on your computer and you can click a link, you're in. And you can get this wonderful information. You know, there's the downside to Zoom and then to the pandemic of making everything virtual, but there's a positive side, is that we've all gotten used. It's connected us more than we've been ever connected before. But the resources are abundant from the NHA, from Dr. Furman, from Chef AJ, from PCRM, from T. Colin Campbell, and the list, and more are popping up every day. Vegan Link. Just become resources. So becoming a member of the NHA is really easy. We have a website at healthscience.org. You can join the NHA. It's only $35 a year if you live in the United States. If you live outside the United States, it's $55 a year. That includes your subscription to our magazine, Health Science, that comes out quarterly, an actual publication. And when you join the NHA, for that same $35 or $55 wherever you live, depending on where you live, you can get all of the back issues of Health Science magazine, all 43 years of back issues, for nothing. You can download them. They're all searchable. So you name the subject of health that you want, and you can read all of those archives for nothing. In addition, there are some ebooks on the history of our health movement, one called The Greatest Health Discovery, Fasting Can Save Your Life, on water fasting. If you tried to find that book on eBay, it would cost you $50 to $75 if you could find it. If you're a member of the NHA, you can download it for free, whether it's on a Kindle or a Mobi or whatever your vehicle, or you just want to download it as a PDF. Those are all benefits of membership in the NHA, and it's quite a value, and the cost of membership probably hasn't been raised in 20 years. So we try to keep the NHA affordable for as many people as possible, and we try to keep the member benefits really high. And we've just recently started a new program in the NHA called Power Your Health Q&A. So every month, I think it's the third Tuesday of every month, at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, I do an interview with a doctor, and it's absolutely free. You can post your questions. It's live streamed to Facebook and YouTube. And it's, again, just another nice benefit for membership in the NHA.